U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis arrives in China to discuss strategic security issues as tensions escalate between Washington and Beijing. And reducing the U.S. trade deficit with China, why the U.S. state of Alaska believes it could be part of the solution. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Next week, the United States is set to impose tariffs on $34 billion worth of Chinese imports, and Beijing says it will reciprocate with matching tariffs on American goods. The U.S. state of Alaska is watching the escalating trade dispute closely. Last year alone, China purchased more than $1.3 billion of goods, primarily seafood, from the state. Alaska officials say their natural resources, such as liquefied natural gas, could contribute to narrowing the U.S. trade gap with China. Earlier, I had the chance to speak with Alaskan Governor Bill Walker about the current state of U.S.-China trade relations. Governor, thanks for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Alaska is a huge trading partner with China. In fact, China is Alaska's biggest trading partner. It's also the biggest export destination for Alaska. How big a risk to Alaska's economic health is this escalating trade dispute between the United States and China?
Well, obviously, we're taking it very seriously. Seafood is our major export from Alaska to China, so we take that seriously. We're looking at what we can do to help soften the blow of that and hopefully eliminate the dispute that's going on right now.
What efforts are you making?
Well, I'm certainly talking with the Trump administration at a very high level. Certainly, we have relationships in China with what we've been doing on our trade. We just came back from what we call Opportunity Alaska. We had 50 Alaskans go to China for about 10 days to look at trade opportunities. So we're in a bit of a unique position because of our proximity and our historic ties to China.
What did that visit accomplish? What did you get from the Chinese?
Well, again, it confirmed what I already knew. I've been there 3 times in the last year, that there's a tremendous opportunity for both China and Alaska. We have things that product they would very much like, and we very much like to have a market for our product. So it's a good fit. What they need is the products that we have, and we need customers for our product. We have a very small population and a very large state, and they have obviously a very large country population-wise as well, and we need a population for our products.
And what kind of response are you getting from the Trump administration? Alaska is being called collateral damage in an escalating trade dispute.
Well, we think we're in a unique position to help resolve that. One of the largest export opportunities in America comes from Alaska. Our liquefied natural gas project that we're putting together with companies in China, with U.S. companies, to export LNG, and it's a $1 trillion opportunity. It's a $10 billion a year. We believe we have at least a 100-year supply of gas, so a $1 trillion opportunity on the trade deficit is very significant.
Right. You've signed an agreement with China's petrochemical corporation, Sinopec. What is the status of that project right now?
It's continuing to progress. In fact, I've been in meetings here on this trip on that issue. A lot of interest from the federal government, a lot of interest from China. The stars are very much aligned for this project to happen. It's happening.
Could it be in any kind of jeopardy if China imposes tariffs on energy imports?
Well, anything could impact the project, but I don't think it would be fatal to the project. And so I think it's one that we will deal with whatever ultimately resolves and find a way to make the project work. So I'm not sure. I think there's desire on both sides to resolve this. I think we have a unique opportunity to sort of bring this project forward as an example of what we should be doing.
When you talk about resolving this, are you talking about exemptions or waivers to these products?
Well, either that or just resolving the differences. In other words, we need more products going from the U.S. to China. This is one example of that. China is very interested in this project. I think partly for that reason, partly because they would love to have the energy, the stable supply. So it's a win-win. So I think that this could be a catalyst to sort of help bring this to a close.
Governor, one of President Trump's biggest complaints, one of his primary complaints, has been the trade deficit with China. What role can projects like the ones you're talking about do to reduce that deficit?
Well, I mean, we need to ship more products to China. And I don't think we're going to send, necessarily electronics, but we certainly can send raw materials and natural resources. Alaska is if we were a separate country, we'd be the 8th richest resource country in the world. That's how much resources we have in Alaska. So we're about 7 hours away, 7.5 hours away by direct flights, which we're working on. We're 7 to 9 days away by ship. No canals to go through, no impediments at all. So we are a natural fit to sort of help break that deadlock.
Because if you look at that gas project, just $10 billion a year, that puts a pretty big dent in that deficit.
It would, and it would go on for, we think, 100 years. So I think those are the kinds of projects that are going to bring down the trade deficit, and that's what we need to be focusing on.
Now, as you pointed out, you've been talking to the White House, to President Trump's people. What about representations to the U.S. Congress?
We have certainly been through our delegation, of course. There's no question we work through them, with them, but really, this project that we're working on really is a thing. The pieces are in place to do that. We don't need an act of Congress necessarily to make this project a reality. So there are things that can be done to make it better, but not an absolute requirement. And
from the Chinese side, do you detect that there is sympathy for your point of view, for the problems that you are facing right now as the governor of Alaska?
I think they do, and I think that also they would like to have this is an environmental project. This will reduce the emission by 80 million tons per year in China. So that's something that they would love to have. When President Xi came to Alaska, we spent time together. He saw the clean skies in the areas where we have natural gas. So I think it's they generally want this to happen, and so for a number of reasons.
And I was wondering, could this get any worse than it is already? Because President Trump has already called on the Trade Department to identify $200 billion worth of goods more in terms of imposing tariffs.
Well, things can always get worse, I guess, but I think that our focus is making them better, and again, using Alaska as an example of really how you, if we in Alaska can start bringing down the trade deficit, then other states will as well. There's about 1,500 transactions or deals between China and the 50 U.S. states. Alaska represents 3 of those 1,500 deals. So obviously want to increase the number of deals we have with China, but other states can as well, to be able to bring down that trade deficit.
Now, insofar as Alaska is concerned, what kind of benchmarks could we hope to see in the months ahead to show us that this is being resolved?
Well, I think we started to see, binding agreements between Alaska and Chinese companies on this LNG project. It certainly would be a significant step. I absolutely believe that.
Governor, you mentioned the environment earlier on. I have one final question on climate change. Alaska is already feeling the effects of climate change. In fact, the Lieutenant Governor of Alaska said the change has been so real and so widespread that it's become impossible to ignore. How does Alaska fight climate change right now, given that the president has withdrawn from a big, important international agreement, the Paris climate deal?
Well, we don't need an international agreement for us to work on our own state. So I'm an independent. I'm the only independent, nonpartisan governor in the nation. So we do what we think is best for Alaska without party affiliation. We put together a climate change committee to look at, in Alaska, sort of what needs to be done. We're sort of at ground zero. We have villages that need to be relocated, that erosion, the sea ice is not there anymore in the Kivalina area, and so that island is getting smaller and smaller with the community located there. So we have to address that, and we are addressing that. But we're a hydrocarbon economy. When I came into office, we were 90% dependent upon hydrocarbons. That's come down significantly as a result of some things we've changed. But we still have a tremendous amount of hydrocarbon opportunity. So we want to make sure that that gets developed to help be able to fund the relocation of villages, relocation impact of climate change. So it's a bit of a challenge, but also a bit of an opportunity as well.
Governor Walker, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That was Governor Bill Walker from the U.S. state of Alaska. Coming up, the U.S. defense chief travels to Beijing. We'll discuss what's at stake next on The Heat.